Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I was going to film this video in the gym during my training session, but I was stupid and I left my mic at home. So we are back in my room once again. So in today's video, we're going to talk about perfect form. So does it really matter? Does it even really exist? How not to get there? Why being neurotic is like the worst thing that you can do if you're trying to get fit? A little bit about overcoaching and why being a bit of a meathead might actually make you a little bit better in the gym. So it's pretty fitting, given that the backdrop is exactly the same, but this video is almost like a bit of a companion piece to my last video where I talked a lot about analysis paralysis and learning by doing. We're going to talk a lot about that today as well. And it's also somewhat inspired. I did write the script first before the video came out, so get off my back. But it's a little bit inspired by a video that my coach, Angus posted the other week, talking about movement quality and how to actually improve your movement quality. So I'll link those in the description below. Go check them both out. They're both, especially mine, they're both really good videos. So I saw a clip on YouTube Shorts ages ago. I think it was from Dave Tate's Table Talk podcast. And it was him and guest, whose name escapes me, talking about how intellectual, smart people tend to actually have a bit of a harder time in the gym and how you kind of stereotypical kind of dumb meathead jock types actually tend to excel a little bit. And while that might at first seem a little bit intuitive, I don't think it's a hard and fast rule. It's more of a rule of thumb. But I do think there is a little bit of truth to it. And today we're going to break down partially why I think that is. I think a lot of people, especially people that don't really have an athletic background or a background in lifting or fitness, they come at exercise with a very kind of intellectual brain first approach. Chances are they're in the gym because they think that it's something they should be doing. And because of that, because it's not something that they are necessarily like intrinsically drawn towards for its own sake, they want to do it right. I think a lot of people come at training with this mindset of you just need to learn everything there is to learn, get that perfect technique, understand it all on a very like cerebral level, and then you just need to execute it, and then you're going to do it correctly. But unfortunately for those type of people, training is primarily physical. It is a somatic experience. It's a somatic thing where we are using our body as the vehicle by which to experience what we're doing. So a purely brain-driven approach is not going to get us the results we actually want, and it's probably going to push us further away from where we want to get to. In my opinion, it's not enough just to know something, you have to feel it as well. If you've never done a barbell back squat before, if you've never done a snatch before, if you've never done a 10-meter Excel before, chances are the first time you do it, unless you are a bit of a specimen or you're just a bit of a prodigy, it's going to suck. It's going to feel weird, it's going to feel awkward, and you're not going to be really getting the desired physical outputs that we want. It doesn't really matter how many technique cues you have in your brain, how many details and points, how many videos you've watched. It doesn't really matter. None of that will make your performance any better the first few times you do it. You just kind of need to get those reps in and get the experience of what it feels like to do the movement. Because once you do it kind of shitty and you know what that feels like, you can start to get closer to feeling what it feels like to do it right. Having this perfectionist mindset in the gym, I think, is absolute poison to your gains. It's a really, really common thing that I see a lot of beginners in the gym struggle with. It's something that I've struggled with in the past. And I think there are a lot of different reasons why people might have developed this attitude. Sometimes, and this is a massive bugbear of mine as a coach, it does actually come from the coach's end. I've worked under coaches before where for all the good things they did and all the things I learned from them, they would often interrupt me with clients, coach my client kind of above me as their coach, and give them all these kind of different things to think about, all these different cues to consider when they'd only been training for a couple of weeks. And when I look back on that, apart from the fact that it is just generally quite rude, I think it's quite poor etiquette on their part. And also it really undermined my confidence as a coach back in the early days of me working in the fitness industry. I don't think it actually helped anybody train any better. But what I do think overcoaching does is it makes an insecure coach feel a bit smarter. A lot of coaches, especially if they come from a more like academic, sports science, biomechanics first background, they have this urge in them to let their client know that they are very, very smart, that they know lots of things about how the body works and how it moves. They know lots of things about how different exercises should feel. And they feel like if they're not constantly talking and constantly giving their client hyper detailed feedback on every little thing that they're doing, then they're not doing their job, or their client is going to think that they're lazy or they don't know anything. In my experience, this just isn't really true. I think a lot of clients don't really give a fuck about how smart you are as a coach or how many different joint actions you can list out. They care about the results that you're getting them. But I digress. That's not why most of you are here. On the other hand, I think that this hyper detail orientated neurotic mindset towards training can actually come from the trainee, from the client, or from you, from themselves. Thankfully, I think we are kind of seeing a bit of a sea change in the way that coaches and fitness industry professionals communicate ideas now. But for a very long time, and especially when I was coming up as a coach, the kind of industry standard for communication with clients was very biomechanics forward. It was this very specific idea of exercises are done in very specific ways, because if they are done in other kind of deviant ways, that's guaranteed to lead to injury, because the body is meant to move in very specific ways. And kind of going outside of that, kind of coloring outside the lines, if you will, was really dangerous and really risky. So there was this idea that if you have perfect form, that's going to help you avoid injuries. This really kind of nasty concept of people having to earn the right to do certain exercises by doing these like insane movement assessments or like functional movement screens that don't really have any relevance to actual good strength and conditioning training in the gym. They're kind of designed to make people fail, so the coach feels like they are needed a bit more. And I just want to be clear. I think that the majority of coaches generally working in the industry, but even the majority of coaches who do have these ideas about biomechanics and form, I don't think they're bad actors. I like to believe personally that the majority of people in this industry are in it to help people and they're in it for the right reasons. But whether it's subconscious or whether it is kind of more conscious charlatanism, if you will, is that even a word? I think that a lot of coaches have these like two contradictory ideas in their head, which is on the one hand, they'll tell people, oh, lifting weights is safe. It's a really great way to get in shape. It's a really good way to exercise. It's very, very predictable. It's very safe. This is all true. But then in the same breath, they'll also say, but if you don't let me coach you and teach you how to do it right, if you deadlift and your back's a bit rounded, or if you squat and you get a bit of butt wink, then your spine's going to explode and you're going to be paralyzed. So you really need to hire me as a coach, because that's the only way that you can learn how to do this safely. And I think that at best, these ideas are kind of contradictory. And at worst, there is some active dishonesty and kind of underhanded sales tactics going on. But I do think that the majority of coaches have good intentions. I think that the actively dishonest or actively disingenuous coaches are thankfully fewer and far between. Functional patterns, we're looking at you. If you're a beginner yourself, you might have thought this, or if you spend a lot of time in gyms, you've definitely heard people saying this idea of, I want to have perfect form before I put any weight onto these exercises. And I don't think this is entirely bad advice. If it is your first time ever doing a lift, just say like a barbell back squat, you probably shouldn't load up 4 plates. But if you never actually put any weight and work up to anything that's like remotely physically challenging, that perfect technique that you spent so long honing on an empty bar or, God forbid, a PVC pipe is never going to hold up under any kind of stress. I've said it before, but lifting heavy weights, specifically heavy weights, whatever that is for you, is a skill in and of itself. And if you never practice it, you're never going to get good at it. It is to be expected and totally normal for your form to get a little bit scrappier the closer you get to a max or a PB, or even just like the higher percentages of difficulty. And we do want to try and keep our form consistent from bar to heavy singles. We want to keep some like key performance indicators very similar. We don't want to see lots and lots of crazily variant technique. That's true. But I think if you have this mindset of everything needs to look exactly the same, and if there's any deviation, I need to deload, I think you're going to be stuck on that hamster wheel for a very long time and you're not actually going to make any progress. Having that beautiful form with an empty bar is really great, but if you never practice maintaining that beautiful form on a heavy weight, it's just not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. It sounds really, really obvious when you say it out loud, but you don't get good at lifting heavy weights unless you are regularly lifting heavy weights. In fact, I would go as far as to say that some exercises, a lot of exercises, are actually really hard to perform with good technique if there's no weight on the bar. A really good example would be a deadlift. If I'm doing like a conventional deadlift from the floor with just an empty bar, I can do loads of crazy stuff. I can go crazy into spinal flexion. I can rotate. I can let the bar run away from me. And because it's so light and it's comparatively very easy for me to lift, I am not forced to be efficient with the movement. I can make loads of like form mistakes and still complete the rep. Whereas if I went and loaded up a bunch of plates, that is a very, very different story. If I want to lift a weight that is reasonably challenging for me, I need to have reasonably acceptable form because it is just going to be a more efficient way of moving the weight. actually seeing these form deviations pop up as you go up in weights can actually be really, really helpful for improving your technique and for getting stronger. If we stick to that example of a deadlift, if your hips shoot up straight off the floor and your knees sticking with that example of a deadlift, if your knees shoot back and your hips pop up right as soon as you start the pull from the floor, that's probably a good sign that you need to get a bit more leg drive and maybe increase your quad strength. Alternatively, if you have that really nice neutral spine, that really good straight, strong brace, and then as soon as you pull, you just get yanked forward into spinal flexion, that might be an indication that you need to get a bit of a stronger lower back or work on your bracing or your core strength. If you never touch these heavier weights that are going to force these errors out of you, you're never going to see where you actually need to correct these mistakes and where you actually need to improve specifically. There's a bit of a weird analogy that I actually really like, is that lifting weights is like having a conversation with the barbell. If the weight is too light, I can't hear what the barbell is saying to me. The barbell is trying to give me feedback and to give me information to make my life easier, to make the job of lifting the weight easier. But if there's not enough weight on the bar, I can't hear that feedback the bar's giving me. Conversely, if I load up way too much weight and there's no shot that I can even move it, or there's no shot that I can move it with like good technique, that means that the bar is way too loud. The bar's screaming at me and I can't actually take in any of the feedback that it's giving me. We want to have weights that are in like suitable range where we are going to hear what the barbell is telling us and we're going to get that feedback that we need to improve. But it's not so much and it's not so loud and it's not so heavy that we're not going to get any kind of productive stimulus out of it. It's just going to absolutely fry us and we're not going to know where to focus our energy. I would go as far as to argue that perfect form doesn't exist. It's a spectrum. What is a good squat form for me, for my history, for my strengths, for the length of my limbs, for the shape of my body, is going to look different to the shape of another person's body and how they complete that task. If you look at the way that powerlifter, an Olympic lifter, a strongman, a CrossFitter, if you look at the way that these people all complete the same exercise, say, for the sake of argument, again, a barbell back squat, they will all look quite different because they all have different goals, they have different histories, they're strong in slightly different ways. None of them are wrong, they can all be correct, but there is a lot of variance in how the exercise is completed. And this isn't to say that movement quality and form doesn't matter at all. Like I said earlier, there are KPIs that we generally want to be consistent in hitting to make sure that the exercise is doing what we want it to do. For instance, when we're talking about our squat, we probably want to keep pretty even midfoot pressure in our feet the whole time. We want to have a relatively rigid brace, and we don't want like crazy changes in back angle, especially on the ascent when we're coming out of the hole. Unfortunately, if you want to improve at a skill, you do have to just do the thing. No perfect cue, no amount of technical knowledge, no expert coaching is going to get you your first pull-up or a 2 bodyweight deadlift or a sub 25K. You just need to get some skin in the game and actually just crack on. The old cliche is trust the process. And I do think that's very true for a lot of people and for a lot of cases. But I think even more than that, it should be trust your body. Your body and your brain and how they work together, they're fucking amazing. And if you just give them regular exposure to a task, you are going to get better at it, even if you don't particularly think about it that hard. If you have just a little bit of self-awareness, a little bit of focus, and give it a lot of time, you are going to see these improvements. You see it all the time coaching beginners, especially with like a hip hinge. They come in and it doesn't really matter what you tell them. It doesn't matter what you say to them. On that first session, they might just not get it. And that's okay. If you, for instance, a random example, if you wanted to learn a new language, you wanted to speak a new language, you wouldn't be able to speak it fluently on your first lesson. And that sounds really obvious because it's a new skill that you've just never done before. So why do we think that lifting is any different? I think a lot of people think that exercise is something that you can just do right on your first day if you are smart enough or good enough. And that if you can't do that, then it's not for you. This is completely untrue. It is just skill like anything else. It just takes practice and reps and time. By all means, you should try and use cues that you think are helpful. You should try and improve your technique. You should have that self-awareness of where you need to improve and where you should spend your energy. But you don't need to try and fix everything at once. If you are new to lifting in general, you don't need to try and do everything at the same time. The next time you try an exercise, whether it's one that you've been doing for a while or it's one that you are completely new at, just try and come to your sets with 1, maybe 2 very simple, very basic cues to think about, and then try and let the rest go blank. Try not to be thinking about it super hard during the set itself. Film yourself, talk to your coach, think about your technique between the reps, between the sets, But when you're actually trying to execute it, just try your best. Like I just said, this is where recording sets can be super, super, super helpful, especially if you don't have a coach. I didn't have a coach lifting wise for the first couple of years of me lifting. I was just propping up my phone with my water bottle and filming my own sets. And the feedback you get, again, if you have a little bit of self-awareness and you kind of roughly know what it should look like, that you can get just from watching your sets back is so invaluable. It's such a great habit to get into. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it a million more times. Being neurotic is the worst thing you can be if you actually are serious about improving your health, improving your fitness, and developing a skill. You don't have to be perfect from day one. You don't have to be perfect on day 1001. You just need to try and find that sweet spot of good enough, stay consistent, don't get discouraged, and keep showing up. The technique will improve, you will get stronger, you'll get those physical adaptations, and it is going to be fine. So shut up, stop watching Squat University, go to the gym, do some good hard sets, watch them back once you're done with them, and don't try and be perfect. Find the inner gym bro inside you and just get to work. All right, so that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. You can check out my Instagram, my application for online coaching, and my website in the description below. Check out some of my other videos. We're posting every single week. So if you have any ideas for more content, if there's any topics that you want me to have a little deep dive into, please let me know in the comments below. Tell me what you think. If you found this useful, if you found it annoying, if you think I've got a stupid voice, just let me know. But either way, hopefully I will see you again next week. And yeah, go do some good training. See you later.